Hello, my friends. Welcome back. Glad to see you. I take it you are enjoying these episodes, otherwise, you would not be here. Otherwise, if you are joining us for the first time, this is the series I call The Good, the Bad, and the Bible. Little bit of a play on the good, the bad, and the ugly. Old American Western movie. But this series talks about the good and the bad things in the Bible. What is worth following and what is worth shunning and turning away. Because, surprise, surprise, the Bible is not so holy when you actually look at it and study it, take it at face value for what it says. You'll discover it is not so logical. Today, we are actually going to be bouncing back and forth quite a bit between good and bad things, all kind of meshed together. So without any further ado, my name is Rogan and you are watching The Mysterious Stoner in a Bowler. Now this week we are in Leviticus chapter 19. And for most of the chapter, and the next one, they repeat a number of laws that were talked about in Exodus. I'm not going to go through them, because what's the point in that? It'll just be the same thing over again. However, there are some laws that have been interjected in between some of these repeated laws. Laws that we have not had before. And those are the ones we are going to talk about. A few of them anyways. So the first law we talk about, God says, if someone is going to bring me a peace offering, you must offer it of your free will. And God talks about how to do it. And they were, in this particular case, because there were many different sacrifices, for this particular one, they were allowed to eat of the meat of the sacrifice that they offered to God. But only for the first 2 days. For some reason, after the third day, if they ate from the meat, and they didn't dispose of it properly, then God commanded the punishment that we have heard over and over again. That soul shall be cut off from among his people. Whether it mean banishment from the nation or execution. No one's 100% sure, but it is nothing pleasant. So, for a voluntary sacrifice to God, if you don't perform your voluntary sacrifice to God properly, you will be executed or banished from the nation. Very, very grateful, God, for your volunteer sacrifice, that you have to take it that seriously. Seems like he's overreacting just a bit, don't you think? And then we come to the next law, which, surprisingly, is actually pretty good. In the very next verse, God says, when ye reap the harvest of your land, thou shalt not wholly reap the corners of thy field, neither shalt thou gather the gleanings of thy harvest. Thou shalt not glean thy vineyard, neither shalt thou gather every grape of thy vineyard. Thou shalt leave them for the poor and stranger. So, in plain English, what that means, God was saying, when it is time for harvest, don't harvest the very corners of your fields. Don't get all of your grapes from your vineyards. Don't collect 100% of your fruits and such from your crop, from your fruit trees and such. leave some behind for the poor and the strangers. That is an excellent, excellent, very kind-hearted law. Doesn't make up for any of the other bad ones that we have discussed before, but it is one of the small collection of good things that actually comes out of God's mouth. And then, of course, the next law, we go back to something not so great. Then, believe it or not, he does it again. He has this commandment in verse 14. Thou shalt not curse the deaf, nor put a stumbling block before the blind. So to basically respect and don't fuck with the handicapped. That's a great law. I agree with this. It doesn't say what the consequences of disobeying either of these laws are. It's strange. Certain laws that God lays out has certain punishments with them. And then there are commandments he gives that have no punishments provided for. So I don't understand what Moses or the leaders of Israel are supposed to do if someone disobeys these rules that don't have a punishment attached to it. But okay. Well, that's Yahweh for you, not giving you everything you need, only half of it, and a lot of it is bad information. And speaking of bad, that is the next thing we come to. Something curious I discovered. We come to this verse 20. Yes, verse 20. Whosoever lieth carnally with a woman, that is a bondmaid, betrothed to an husband, and not at all redeemed, nor freedom given her, she shall be scourged, meaning beaten. They shall not be put to death, because she was not free. And the guy it says in the next verse that he has to bring his trespass offering to God, to the tabernacle, their temple on wheels, basically. And he has to give a ram for sleeping with a woman who is promised to a man in marriage. Now this was back then, so more than likely, not always the case, but I mean there'd be times when the woman would not, I mean she would be betrothed to a husband, to a man. This is basically a woman who is not married, but she's basically a fiancée. She's promised to be married, and she sleeps with another guy. She gets beaten. It only says that she gets beaten. It does not say that the man gets beaten. Do you see the issue here? They are both guilty. Sure, the man has to sacrifice a ram. The woman doesn't have to sacrifice a lamb here, apparently. She just has to be beaten. Does that sound right to you? It doesn't sound right to me. I mean, if you're going to beat one person, you should beat both. They're technically both responsible, right? According to the Bible, the man is above the woman. That is the Bible. Not my opinion. I believe men and women should be equal, treated equal, that they are naturally equal. But the Bible does not believe that. So why is it, like, I understand that a ram is not being required of the woman because typically the women would be poorer, because back then they were a lot more sexist and they were very demeaning of women and treated them like second-rate citizens depending on what level in society they were. And a lot of times they were treated like property. A lot of times in the Bible they are treated like property. But there's no issue beating a woman here, but the man is required to give a ram. It makes sense why the ram would be required of the man in this case and not the woman, because of the times, most cases the woman would not own a whole lot. There weren't a lot of strong independent women around these times. If they were royal and rich, not barely getting by and poor. Most of those women were typically owned by someone else or living in their parents' home until they got married, or they were servants or slaves. That's typically how it was back then. But I mean, scourging, being beaten, that's a pretty serious punishment. Even if the man is considered that much more important, to where he has to give a ram, if he can afford it, providing he's not also poor or whatever. But why is he not beaten as well? Because shouldn't he be more responsible? Shouldn't he get the same punishment but a little bit more? I mean, I don't see a ram as being a worse punishment per se. Maybe more expensive, because the beating doesn't, well, it costs flesh and blood, possibly, pain. Monetary wise, I don't know how much a ram is worth for back then, but it just doesn't seem right to me. Like, I can't think of a way to really justify the situation. I don't see why either one of them have to be beaten at all. That seems more like a interest on God's part of watching people suffer. Why can't they both pay something? Why can't she do turtle doves or something? Because that was like the cheap alternative to a lot of sacrifices. Why does she have to be beaten for this? Because she's considered property, not special. Because in the Bible, men, well, okay, let's start at the top. God, men, women, and then children. That is how the Bible puts it. I will look for the verse and post it up on here so you can see that for yourself. Next verse. We have come across some strange laws in the Bible. A lot of them about blood and sacrifices. A lot of them about women and intercourse, eating. But this one is very different. Verse 27. Ye shall not round the corners of your heads, neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy beard. You probably don't know what that means, do you? I wasn't really sure what it meant either, and I had to look it up. It is basically describing some kind of haircut to the hair and the beard that apparently God is against. Who fucking knew? Did you know? I bet you didn't before today. God has an issue if you round the corners of your heads. I'm not sure what kind of haircut we're talking about. But then it says on, neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy beard. So, like, don't trim it. Like, don't make it look good. There's a lot of things we can do with hair. Not a lot of things that I can do because I don't mess with my hair a whole lot. But what the fuck? Oh, and then a lot of Christians like the very next verse. You shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you. I am the Lord. That's just part of some of these verses at the end. It says, I am the Lord. But did you catch that? Not to make any cuttings in your flesh, like apparently that was a thing in some cultures to do self-cuttings, but nor print any marks upon you. That right there was what a lot of Christians will take as meaning, and I can understand why, that God is against getting tattoos. I'm sure you've already been able to see. I have one. I have more than one. But it is not up for discussion at this time. God is against tattoos. And against cutting your hair a certain way. Christians, a lot of them, will go absolutely nuts over tattoos. My parents were that type growing up. My sister, who moved out of home early, against my parents' wishes, we made contact with her eventually, and we're reunited and everything, and she came to family reunions and such, and she would be in photos, right? And she had tattoos. Has tattoos. And my parents would look at pictures of her from those events and such, look at the pictures of her, see the tattoos, and be like, and make comments like those. I can't even repeat because honestly I didn't give a shit, and I didn't really understand why she did. Well, I mean, I was a Christian at the time, so I sort of did, but I mean, she was kind of overboard with it because, I mean, my sister wasn't a Christian, and so I was like, well, that's what un-Christians do, right? They do things like that. So whatever. I didn't know any better. It was, but that's an example. And like some Christians will even go up to people with tattoos on the street and tell them it's bad for them or whatever. I remember when my mother saw one of my first tattoos, she said, "You know that's going to be with you the rest of your life, right?" And I replied, "That's the point. That's why I was careful in choosing them." But it's all because of this verse right here. Don't ask me to explain why some Christians get tattoos. I don't understand. I think it might have something to do with Jesus doing away with all the laws of the Old Testament and whatnot. I'm not sure. And that's funny because I've met Christians who did basically believe that and got tattoos, Christian themed tattoos, and then later decided, but the Bible actually says that God doesn't like tattoos, so I think I'll get it removed. Seriously, they did that. They paid the extra money and went through the extra pain to get rid of the Christian tattoos that they had placed on themselves in their happy zealousness for God. And in their happy zealousness for God, in their guilty zealousness for God, they got rid of those tattoos. Pretty much because of this verse. But no one takes the one right before it seriously. Thou shalt not round the corners of your heads, neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy beard. Yahweh must be pissed at so many Christians out there who won't get their hair done properly and their beards done properly. Probably thinking these crazy Christians, they go after the tattoos, that's great. They don't cut themselves, that's great. But the hair, I put it in the Bible for a reason. You are supposed to follow it. The tattoos, yeah, you're making me happy by not getting them. That's great. But the hair, don't cut your hair like that. You're doing it wrong. What is wrong with you? These are my commandments. I am Yahweh. I am the Lord your God. Don't fuck with your hair. Don't trim the corners of your beard. I am God. Fuck this guy. And Christians, don't tell me that Christians don't cherry pick what they choose to get picky about. Because they will talk shit about tattoos, but they won't talk shit about hair and beards. Unless it's a very unconventional hairstyle or something like that. There's a verse somewhere against men with long hair or with hair looking like women or something like that. And my parents were against that too. I am a bit of a rebel. Next verse we come to an actual good one. Wow. Verse 29. Do not prostitute thy daughter to cause her to be a whore. Literally what the Bible says. Great advice, right? I'm absolutely 100% on board with this. It is one of the less unequal laws that God has managed to come up with. The reason that he provides, you would think it's because, well, she's your daughter, not your property. You're not her pimp. You're her father. You should treat her well. You should take care of her. You know, like a father is supposed to take care of their daughter lovingly, not like, what the fuck, why would you rent your daughter out like that? That is, honestly, that is messed up. That is really, really messed up. The reason why God says not to do it, though, is not for any of those moral reasons. The reason he gives, nothing about for the sake of the daughter. The reason is, lest the land fall to whoredom, and the land become full of wickedness. So God has an issue against prostitutes. He doesn't really give that much of a shit about your daughter. He wouldn't have had a verse, a commandment, that basically allows men to get away with rape if he cared. He wouldn't have a law dedicated to having a woman beaten if she agreed to sleep with someone she wasn't engaged to. She might not have been in love with the guy she was promised to. That was something I was trying to get to. I lost track of that rabbit trail. A lot of cases that she wouldn't even want to be getting married to that guy in the first place. And maybe she sleeps with her lover, the person she is genuinely, truly would be much happier with. She gets beaten for that. He only has to sacrifice a ram. Like, who does God really seem to give more of a shit about? It seems like he cares a lot more about men than he does about women. And that does not seem right to me. It's great that he doesn't want fathers to pimp out their daughters, because that is a morally terrible thing to do. But his reasons? He's against prostitution? And let's talk about that briefly. I have partaken in the act legally. At the Bunny Ranch, in fact, if you've heard of it. It was featured in some show somewhere. I happened to be driving through the area when I was a trucker, and the team driver I happened to be with told me about it, and we had some spare time on our hands, and I decided to go check it out. He stayed in the truck because he was married. Good man. I was very single and decided to go inside. And, I was actually quite, I heard it was, professional and everything. I did a little bit of research before I got there, but it was very clean. It was professional. I got a brief tour of the place. Very nice location. They even have doctors come in to certify and make sure everyone's clean and everything. They pay taxes, and they actually do a lot of good for their state, monetarily. So if done properly, prostitution can actually be a useful thing to the economy. But God, in his infinite wisdom, has problems against this. Always against progress with God. Always against human progress. But we have one more good section, one little section coming up here for God. He has a few good ideas back to back. Starting right here. Thou shalt rise up before the hoary head and honor the face of the old man. Basically saying when an elderly person walks into the room, to stand up in their presence out of respect for them. For a culture, sure, I can dig this commandment. I can understand respecting elderly citizens to a certain degree. I think we should hold some extra little bit of respect for older people in general. Of course, if they don't act their age, don't give them that respect, because some people really don't deserve it. Don't judge a book by its cover. Respect the elderly, yes, unless they really don't deserve it. Because there are some bad old people out there. Bad old people. But otherwise, great commandment. If a stranger sojourn with thee, stays with you in your land, you shall not vex him. Don't fuck with him. Don't piss him off. But the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as thyself. For ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. This is excellent. Excellent. Excellent, excellent commandment. And I believe everyone should be like this. This is one of the best commandments here. To treat others as one who is born among you. Be friendly to all. Not just those who are like you, but to the strangers as well. Treat everyone with respect to some degree when you first meet them. Be kind to those you don't know. Try to get along with everyone that you can. Thou shalt love him as thyself. And yet, we have some problems because back in Leviticus chapter 7, chapter 17, verse 8 and 9, God talks about strangers. He's talking about commandments. He's giving out commandments that includes strangers. Saying, whatsoever there be of the house of Israel or of the strangers that sojourn among you, that offereth a burnt offering or sacrifice, bringeth it not unto the door of the tabernacle and of the congregation, yada yada yada, to offer it unto God, blah blah blah. Even that man, strangers included, shall be cut off from among his people. Verse 13. Whatsoever man there be of the children of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn among you, which hunteth and catcheth any beast of the fowl that may be eaten, he shall even pour out blood thereof and cover it with dust. And that he is talking about not eating blood. He says even strangers are not allowed to do this. So people with different customs from different lands that are coming through, this was something God did not want them to do. Same as he wanted them to bring in sacrifices to the altar every time they did it. I don't know why a stranger would be making... At face value, it sounds like a stranger could be making a sacrifice to their own God, and God wants a piece of it. God doesn't really lay that out. But that's what it sounds like. Then over here, people who eat blood, even if they're strangers, and that's just how they do things from where they are, they also have to be cut off from among the people, banished or executed, whatever that particular meaning is for this overly used phrase for a punishment. And in Exodus, chapter 18, verse 22, it says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." Yes, witch. Not the Hollywood kind, but the shaman, witch doctor, spiritual person of a village type of individual. God was against those people as well. And he says it again here in Leviticus 19:31. I skipped it to get to the good shit because there's always more bad shit. "Regard them not that have familiar spirits, neither seek wizards to be defiled by them." And then in chapter 20, God says, "A man also or woman that hath a familiar spirit, or that is a wizard," literally uses that word wizard again, "shall surely be put to death. They shall stone them with stones. Their blood shall be upon them." What happened to "thou shalt love him as thyself"? Oh, God doesn't want his people defiled by that shit. Oh. Christians actually fear that shit. So much so that the Catholic Church had people killed over it. Many times. It happened even in America. But how can God, who is all merciful, all loving, just come right out and say, "Any person of this profession, kill them"? Not going even to give them a chance to repent. You just kill them. Sounds like God is afraid of something. He is afraid. I don't think he's afraid of them being defiled. I think he's afraid of them knowing. It's the same thing that he was afraid of Adam and Eve doing. Knowing. God hindered the people when they were building the Tower of Babel. He changed their languages because he didn't want them becoming like him. He did not want humans to be able to do anything that they set their mind to. Somehow this God was aware of the human's potential. I don't believe in this God, but I believe in human potential. And I believe a lot of people who want to control others also know human potential. But they want the power for themselves. They want to control others. So, they use books like these. They take truth, and then they take some lies that they want to be truth, but they want to be practiced by the people. They put it all together, and they put the word holy on it, in whatever language is necessary to be understood. And then they keep it just confusing enough to where you need a preacher or a priest to explain things. But they all say different things. We've seen some good ideas come from God. We've also seen some pretty sexist shit as well. Some very pro-male shit. Really fucked up. And poor reasoning behind some of the good commandments. God says, love the strangers as yourself. Unless they have this particular profession, then kill them on the spot. In fact, throw rocks at them until they die. because that's a humane way of going. Like, really, having your throat slit by a sharp blade is much more humane than having rocks pummeled at your head. This is a really asshole way to kill someone. And this is a loving, merciful God that doesn't even give these people a chance to repent. Sorry if I don't take your word for it anymore. The Bible tells me so. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. I certainly have. Quite a number of different things in this one, isn't there? I hope you will join me next week. Who knows what we will discover and talk about in the next episode. Come back, my friends. Stay safe. Like, subscribe, and share if you haven't. Until next time, my friends. Farewell.